Professor Wargles here. Let's get into some jQuery syntax. Now remember, with jQuery, you're going to select or query HTML elements and perform actions on them. That's why we're going to call it jQuery. It's like a JavaScript query language. We're going to go into this further so you can understand what I'm talking about. Now, the jQuery syntax is tailor-made for selecting HTML elements and performing some actions on those elements. Here's some basic syntax. So you're going to see this $sign. You'll see this $sign is actually very similar to PHP. The $sign is going to define access to jQuery. So every time you see this $sign in the JavaScript, you're going to know that that's accessing the jQuery library. And then you're going to see two parentheses. The parentheses are going to be the selector or the query to find the HTML element. Now, what I really like about these selectors are they're the exact same as CSS selectors. So if I use a hashtag, that's going to be an ID. If I use a period, that's going to be a class. I can also do type selectors or attribute selectors, and that's what makes jQuery so popular. Whereas with JavaScript, I had to use the getElementById, or I had to use the getElementByClass method, and then inside I had to specify the class, but I didn't use the same notation as CSS. And then you'll see I use the dot notation, and I have some action. Now, an action is going to be a method or a function, and it's going to be a method call to perform on those elements. So let's say I want to change the CSS or change the HTML. You'll want to get used to these jQuery methods that we're using. The selectors are easy because they're the same as CSS selectors, and then you're going to want to get used to this $sign. So the $sign's new, selectors are the same, these methods are new. Now here's some real life examples. So let's say I have an event listener and I click on a paragraph tag and I want to access the current element. I could use the this keyword, and in this case I'm using the hide method. So it's going to hide the paragraph tag that was currently clicked. The other thing I can do is select all paragraph elements. So here I'm selecting an element, which is a paragraph element. That's the same selector as CSS. If I put a P in CSS, it is select all paragraph elements. Or I can select classes. So let's say I do the dot notation and do test. That's going to be a class test. I'm going to hide all the elements with class test on them. Or I can hide one element. Here I'm using a hashtag. That's going to be for an ID. I'm going to hide all the elements where ID is equal to test. In this case, it should be 1 because an ID should only be used once. So here's selecting all paragraph elements. I'm going to hide all paragraph elements. I'm going to hide all elements with class equal to test. I'm going to hide the element with ID equal to test. So basically, if you're familiar with CSS selectors, then you're going to be very familiar with jQuery selectors because jQuery uses CSS syntax to select elements. As said before, the $sign's new and these methods are new. Every time I use the $sign, I'm referencing the jQuery library. Here's a jQuery selector, and then I'm using the dot notation. So after I select this element, then I'm going to call this method. Now you remember with JavaScript, I had to call it document.getElementById, CSS, styles, display equal to none if I wanted to do this. Or I can say $sign, select it, hide it. It's very simple. Or getElementByClassName, styles, display equal to none. Or I could just say test, hide. Very simple, very short, and we'll see this in the next coding example. So we're going to open up location.html. We're going to take a look at some examples that we wrote in JavaScript, and we're going to rewrite them using jQuery. We'll see you in the next video.